4 o'clock. So I'd like to call this study session of the Yuma Union High School District number 70 to order. Would you please stand and say with me the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This is our study session about the trust model policies. I'd like to throw it over to you, Tim.
Thank you. I want to thank everyone for being here, board members and our 3 members in the audience. I do appreciate that. I just want to say, I want to remind people how we got here and maybe what our focus points are for the next few months. Last October, we had an attorney from the trust, Jennifer McClellan, come and report on trust model policies. There was a recommendation the following board meeting for the governing board to make a decision to either move to the trust policies or stay with ASBA, and governing board did vote to move to the trust policies, which will begin July 1st, 2025. So we have a long period of time, but it goes very quickly, to work on adopting recommended policies for July 1st, 2025. And we've actually broken it out. We've gone from 11 ASBA chapters, sections, to the trust has 5. So we've been able to break that out and plan out over 4 governing board meetings. Prior to them, we would have 4 study sessions. And I do know that's a huge investment of your time, governing board, so I do thank you. But you receive the policies in advance, have a chance to review. We have a study session to look at them, talk about the process. We do have some experts who were involved with the current ones being studied. So in this case, it's going to be more about the human resource side. So we have our executive director and director here to talk about that. And I just want to say, I want to compliment Associate Superintendent Diane Cordery, who is leading the work on this, and her secretary, Isabel Sinclair, who's been very organized. So I do thank them for keeping us organized and structured. At the same time, we will have to come back periodically, even though we're looking at section 4 today, and there's a first read at the regular board meeting and proposed second read and adoption next month. There'll be parts of this that we bring back second semester because there's a lot of work that goes into it, and we're getting the majority of it done, but there might be small little areas that we bring back later from each chapter because they needed a little bit more time with the attorneys to make sure that they meet the needs of our community versus the copyright versions. So with that being said, this is an opportunity as we go through it for the governing board to ask questions, and I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Cordery, who will be able to speak more eloquently than I did.
I've never been accused of speaking eloquently. Okay, so I know you know what happens at the board level or what's going to happen tonight, but I wanted to go over the history of what's actually happening before this all gets to you. There is an extreme amount of work that's going into this, as you can imagine. We want to make sure that we have all the information covered that was in our old. We have crosswalks. This is all crosswalks between ASBA policies and ours to make sure that we, or the new system, to make sure that we are covering everything that is in our current policy. And while it does seem like it's a much smaller policy, a set of policies, we want to make sure there's certain things that still need to be in there and make sure that we're covered so that we can continue to do business the way that we do business right now. So any changes above that, of course, would come to the governing board for changes later on, but we want just to match those systems right now at least. So that's the first thing. So how we get there is we start with the department chair or the department heads, and they meet with their department and they review the new policies and compare that to the old ones. Then they get the pleasure of having a meeting with me, and we go through that all over again. And then the department heads, in this case, Mr. Lambert and Mr. Ortega as well, have come and met with our superintendent's cabinet, and we go through it all over again. We did 4 hours today. We just go through every policy and read and ask questions and make sure that we're covering all our bases. And then, of course, it comes to a study session to the governing board, and then it will go to first read and then second read. So that's our process with them being effective, as Mr. Brienza said, July 1st, 2025. So it will be a work in progress. And even through all of those things, we have lots of snafus, of course. It always happens, right? Having said that, as I'm preparing to go over the things with you tonight, we noticed that the numbering that was sent to you, we go to page 23 and then it changes to page 1 again. So I understand that's going to be just a little bit confusing, but we'll go by policy numbers and then I'll give you the first or second set of numbers, how that works. And there's just 4 areas that are not changes. Let me be very clear. We are not changing anything, but we are changing the policy that was given to us by the trust, rewording some things so that it matches our ASBA policy of the way we do business. Not necessarily word for word, but so we can keep going and doing business the way that we have. So those are changes that we've made. So there's 4 areas that we had changes other than just like maybe a word here or word there of, those kinds of things. So let's start with employee evaluations, which is page 6. As you, let me get to page 6. So as you get there, in the middle, follow down towards about the middle of that policy, you're going to see an area called Definition of Inadequate Classroom Performance. This is a simplified version of this is exactly what we do. This is not what was proposed necessarily by the trust. This is exactly what we have done in the past. And this is not anything, it should be nothing new to teachers. This should be very familiar to them.
And if I could add on the teacher evaluation, so teachers are scored 1 through 4. So 1 being ineffective and 4 being highly effective. So as you see numbers in here, just know that it's a 1 through 4. And the ASBA policies are copyrighted, so we just can't take them word for word, nor do we want to. But if there's policies that have been changed and they're not copyrighted with ASBA, we want to bring over that part to our new policies with the trust, because that represents truly what Yuma Union High School District does. And that part with the evaluation is one of them.
Okay, and then if you continue down on that policy, on page 9, you will see about maybe halfway through that page, you'll see the letter M. This was an option that we had to either accept or waive as the trust policies are, and this is exactly what we do now. Again, the board has the right to waive the requirement of a second classroom observation for a continuing teacher whose teaching performance is based on the first classroom observation, places the teacher in one of the 2 highest performance classifications for the current school year, unless the teacher requests a second observation. So that's what we do. So we opted to have that included in the policies.
And Diana, a continuing teacher, just to remind the governing board and the public, is someone who has 3 years of service or more.
Correct. All right, moving right along to page 23. That should be policy 4201, Employee Code of Conduct. So for this, this goes back to the spring of 2022. We contracted with a company called Upslope, and we had administrators, directors, all sorts of folks in the room, and we all decided we were going to come up with a code of conduct of what would be acceptable conduct that we would expect from a teacher. And so we wrote our own code of conduct through this company. And so we have replaced what the trust has proposed and put our own in there, because we obviously invested a lot of time and money to develop these. So in working again with our attorney through the trust, not our attorney, but the trust attorney for the policies, it's recommended that we maybe go back and get that group together and expand that a little bit. Again, we would want to do that with the group and honor their hard work and what they've done, as opposed to just replacing everything they've done in the last couple of years. Yes, sir.
All I'm trying to understand is, you mentioned that you're rewording what
No, we are replacing what the trust proposed with what we had developed in 2022.
And the trust is taking the place of ASBA.
Correct.
So it's a review and a modification of what the trust proposes.
In this,
Did I get that right?
Yes, yes.
They gave us something and you're,
And I think what I should mention too is, yes, and I think what I should mention too is that this has all been reviewed. Once we go to the superintendent's cabinet and we make the changes we think should be there, it goes back to the attorney for the trust to make sure that we're not making changes that are not appropriate to be made. And so she has approved these. So yes, we are changing what they did, but she has approved them.
okay, so the reason I'm asking is then just, and I'm glad you're doing it, just because the trust says something, you are actually saying, we disagree with it, we
Right.
want to do it this way.
Exactly.
and
Again, because we want to do business like we've been doing business at this point, it's not for us to change how we do business. That's up for the governing board in those cases. We just are trying to keep things,
And so your employee code of conduct, this section that you're talking about, you mentioned that it wasn't, you weren't satisfied
right.
with what's in there, or the lawyer wasn't
Right.
satisfied with what's in there?
Not that it's not good, it's great bones, but in the future, we should get the committee back together and maybe expand it. We'll look at what they proposed and then take what we have and maybe be able to combine them.
So that'll be in a future
Yes.
study session?
Yes, so that may be one of those things that we bring back to you in the next 6 months or, even a year or whatever and say, we want to improve this.
Okay. All right, gotcha.
and
So
I-
this is in practice, not just in theory. This is what you do.
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly.
And to be clear, and these are all really good questions, and I really encourage people to ask questions whenever something comes up. So the trust, they own the intellectual property on some of the policies, or actually quite a few of them. But over the years, we have not adopted all the all the ASBA policies as is, because they don't fit what we do in Yuma County, in Yuma Union High School District. So now, as we look at the trust policies, that they're saying, hey, here are all the copyright ones. We just can't copy all the ASBA ones because we don't necessarily agree with all of them either. So we're taking the trust ones, seeing how they differ from what our practice and procedures are, and making tweaks on those so they won't be copyrighted either. So that means that you won't see a little C on there down the road because they're not the copyright one, because we've made changes based upon what we do as a district. The trust does have an attorney who looks at them to make sure that they're still in compliance with all state and federal guidelines and laws and regulations. So far, we've been 100% on that, which is good to know, but they still give us feedback, but we don't accept everything that they're saying, hey, here you go. And the purpose, and they were very clear, the trust is like, here's all the model policies, but they're models.
Right.
Feel free to tweak them and make changes as you see fit for your community, your district, and then we will also review them to make sure they're still in compliance.
Right.
And this is not related to this section, but as we get on with this, for example, nobody in ASBA or the trust had a policy for drones. We went, again, formed a committee, wrote our own policy. That's something that we'll add in both, we've already added to ASBA, we will add to the trust, but we make it our own. That means we can still add those things if that's what we choose to do.
And I'm glad we're going through this. And if one or two board members want to add or take out something, who do we propose it to?
Turn my mic off, sorry. That's the purpose of the study session, though, is to get your feedback. And then also, we do have a first read tonight on them, but that doesn't mean it's the adoption either. So if there's things that you want to give input on, this would be the time as well, in the study session. So that way we can take it back and look at it and then run it by the attorneys and see what happens. And then it will go to the board again for an opportunity for a first read and a vote.
And you didn't want to copyright our policies that you are all working so hard on? Or is that not something that we even need to worry about?
No,
No.
that's not generally something that we do. We can write ours, it just doesn't have the little C on there. and
Right.
It's still,
So it's still
Has the
implementable
same-
and it still becomes our policy? Oh,
exactly,
Okay. Thank you.
sure. Okay, so going back to the code of conduct, you can see we have 12 items listed there. And then this is something that goes out in our employee handbook to all employees, and they sign for every year. And so they agree to abide by that. Then the following policy after that is actually staff and student boundaries. So while the code of conduct is, I don't know if I would say more positive, and this is more that this is, you know, these are the more negative things, I guess, that you could say. But again, it's still a code of conduct to some extent, I would say as well. But these are expectations. Maybe that's what I should say. These are expectations of how a teacher should behave with a student. Then moving on, so that was our second, page 3, by the way. Moving on.
Just for clarity, if there's misnumbering, I've been blamed for that, so I do apologize.
I was so going to go there, but I was controlling myself.
Ms. Cordery's blamed me for any numerical issues with bottom of the pages. I'm not sure how we got here.
There
but
was a little needs to stay in his lane going on, but he hasn't he hasn't totally
I will take the blame, but just
acknowledged that.
check version history.
Okay, so if we could just go to policy 4-302, and I believe that's on your second page 22. So if you keep going down to 22. Yes, and again, that's policy 4-302. And it is called leave. So this is one that in ASBA we had completely written ourselves. Actually, our attorneys had written for us. And now we will take basically what the attorney, well, we did. We sent what our attorneys had written for us for the ASBA policies that we currently are using. We sent those to the trust attorney, and she's made a few tweaks to that, although not too much, just more clarification kind of things. And so what I just would remind you is the board voted on this, and this includes the change in leave and vacation that we started this year, where we now, instead of allocating employee accrues every month, they now get fronted the first paycheck, and also they get half of it at that point, and they get half of it after the first pay of the winter break. And then, of course, if they join us late or they leave before their contract is over, it's prorated. So all of that language is somewhat unique to our district, as well as how many days you accrue based on how long you've been here, and all of those things are built into this policy, but again, are a little unique to I would say probably every district does things just a little bit different. So probably not many have a copyright for this one, but this is what we do. So this is no change to what we have in the way that we operate from our ASBA policy that we use today.
And Diane, just so we can talk about gift of public funds, since we're fronting leave, if someone works for us and leaves before the end of a semester, and they've used all their leave that was fronted to them, let's say they're a first-year teacher or a first-year employee, and they use their 6 days that were given to them, and it's September, it's October, what do we do as a district?
They would have to apply to our HR department for leave without pay. And if it's approved, they wouldn't be paid. If it's not approved, they need to be at work, or that's
Yeah,
a
but what
violation.
happens if they took the days, they got paid for the days, then they no longer work for us?
Oh, then it's prorated. So then we would, on their last pay, we would take whatever dollar amount that was allocated to them. We'll subtract it from their paycheck, and we need to do that so that we're not gifted public funds. We're not overpaying them. So we have that built in to know that on our last paycheck, we can accommodate for that. And if for some reason it's more than their last paycheck, by law, we're required to then go after them and send them a debt letter and try and recoup those funds.
Thank you.
And that's my 4 big rocks that I had for you to share that we had changes in. Were there other questions in any other policies that we didn't touch on, or anything else that we can address for you regarding this chapter?
It's pretty common sense to me. How about you? Either of you?
It's a lot of straightforward law with this. It's not a lot that you have options to make changes to.
Mm-hmm.
So on the regular board meeting agenda today, you're going to see a first read for the trust policies. And then you're also going to see a first read for our current policies, because there's been changes in law that we have to still use ASBA policies for the rest of the year, so our current policies. So you're going to see 2 first reads, and the reason is because we're working under one set of policies and we're working towards adopting another set for July 1st, 2025.
Just coming quickly.
It's right around the corner.
Well, thank you for putting in all this work, everybody. I think that's it. So is there a motion to adjourn our study session? Second? Motion made by Shelley, seconded by David. All those in favor say aye.